Welcome to the Successful Encore Career Podcast, a podcast of Employment for Seniors, brought to you by Nationwide Insurance, Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging, and InnoSource. I'm Brett Johnson, longtime volunteer with Employment for Seniors, and with me is Carol Ventresca, Executive Director.
How are you today, Brett?
Doing great.
I am too. We have been so excited about all these wonderful podcast programs that we've been producing and having a great time doing it. I hope our listeners like it. Let us know if we've missed any topics. If there's something that we have not gotten into our program, we're always looking for new ideas. So please let us know at podcast@employseniors.org. Today's program is something that nobody wants to talk about. So I need to thank Marilyn Bury Rice, who is the director of the Lhota Office of Career Management at Ohio State University's Alumni Association, for joining us today.
Hello, Carol and Brett. Thank you for having me. It is my pleasure.
Sure. Thank you for coming. Okay, Marilyn, no one wants to talk about money. Everybody asks salary questions, but everybody gets real uptight about talking about it. Clients are always asking us what salary negotiations mean. How do they determine what kind of a salary level is appropriate for a specific job in our community? Because it changes over geographic area. And I always tell them to do some research, and they give me that glazed look like, okay, where do I do that? So today, you are going to help us maneuver our way through salary negotiation and the maze of all of this information. Try to make sense of this complicated topic. So, Marilyn, thank you again for joining us. So let's start, though, with an overview of who you are and your background in career counseling.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Well, I have hit the all-time high number of 34 years of experience in the career development field, and I've been privileged to work in higher education. I've also worked in corporate outplacement, we used to call it. Now it's corporate career management, and within nonprofit here in our city. It used to be called Center for New Directions, but now New Directions Career Center. So I've had a nice variety of working with clients in all phases of life, from launching their career through Encore careerists.
Right. And you do a lot of work with Employment for Seniors. Marilyn's also a member of our board of trustees and helps us with our career expo every year. So we tap into her knowledge and database constantly. So this is wonderful having you with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my privilege. Thank you.
So let's do an example. Let's say our listener has gone through the interview process. They've gotten the offer. They're happy with it, and it's given to them. Why should they negotiate that offer?
That is the $100,000 question. So, and the question on most people's mind, because Carol, you're right in that it is not the most comfortable thing to do, to talk about money, to ask for more if appropriate. And so I think the basis is that you should, Brett, the question, why should I? It is part of the job search process. It is a skill that each job seeker should learn about, practice, and utilize. And I will tell you, even for those of us who are career coaches, it's not that comfortable.
Right.
Even when it's our own career that we are navigating. I took this role 6 years ago, and I was poised and ready and to negotiate, and I did it. But it was still nerve-wracking, asking someone that you don't know for.
Well, and for those who were looking for positions during the recession, I mean, you were literally like, please hire me at anything. I just need a job. And today's economy, though, I think, number one, employers are really looking for you.
Yes.
So if you're going to negotiate, boy, now is a really good time to try your skills at this.
Yes, absolutely. So the answer is you should negotiate because, number one, employers expect it. There are a few industries in which they don't, and we'll cover that in just a bit. But in most industries, employers expect it as part of the job search process. In fact, they may begin the salary offer at a little bit lower than they are privy to offer you just because they're waiting for you to negotiate. So it is, it's an objective process. It's not subjective. I mean, there are parts to an offer that we want you to evaluate, but most employers expect that you will negotiate. So if you don't, you may look like, that you're not a savvy job seeker. number one. Secondly, we would hate for you to take the position and then get on the job and learn that someone sitting next to you is making a higher salary doing exactly what you're doing.
Because they negotiated.
They negotiated. And the only time we can negotiate is when we get an offer. So think about that as well. Each year, we're given a percentage raise, hopefully, if the economy's good, if the organization's in the position to give you a raise. And it's always based on that beginning salary.
That's a good point.
So if you do not negotiate at the beginning, you'll never catch up to what you truly would like to make.
That's a great point. I can remember when I returned to Ohio State and negotiated my salary and ended up at the top of the scale they were able to offer me. But had I not done that, it would have been a lot lower. And, but it was because the salary increases would be based on that. And I was coming from a position that I didn't have to leave. So,
and there are some years that Ohio State is not, or universities in general are not able to offer anything. And then, you just want to make sure you're in a good position. So the bottom line is you want to be an informed job seeker. You want to be informed about the market, about your role, about your industry, about that organization, and just make sure that your experience is that you are honoring your experience in this particular market, meaning the city that you're in our case, Columbus, the industry and what other organizations with the industry are offering. How does this salary compare to that? And then ultimately the year's experience that you have, that you bring to the table. Are you being offered the same amount of money that those with your experience are making?
Right.
So that's what I mean about being informed. You want to make sure that you know what's happening in the city, in your industry, and position yourself in that way.
When we talk to clients about their job search and we tell them, there's lots of bits and pieces to research and to look at, this really fits right into that. From the very notion of you've been a powerful worker for many years. So to all of you mature job seekers, don't think that because you are looking for a job when you're 50, 55, 60, that you are no longer a powerful person with really great skills and talent and experience. And that has value. And if you're willing to give that employer all of your skills, experience, talent, and knowledge, it has value. So great. Okay, this is a good start. Thank you so much. Because as I said, nobody wants to talk about money. So the next question that we've heard often is, oh my gosh, I can't negotiate. How about if they rescind the offer just because I've asked for more money?
And, I think that's on the mind of all reasonable people. We're generally modest. We don't, and in particular women, I want to make the point that, and these are statistics nationwide, women typically don't ask because I think in society we are often taught that, that you want to accept and be polite and so forth. So that is part of the reason why women are making about 77 cents to the dollar to men. And so we need to learn to be assertive in this process as well. And so in terms of rescinding, again, most companies expect negotiation. They are poised to negotiate, and we want this to be a win-win process. We want the organization to feel like they're winning, that they have accomplished getting a very good candidate, a valued candidate, and then we want you to feel as if you have won in this negotiation. So a win-win is what we're trying to accomplish. So most organizations, and I will tell you in my 34 years, that I have only heard one story when an offer was rescinded. And that is because the job seeker got greedy. The job seeker went back, I think, negotiated. It was accepted by the organization. Oh, I think I'll try to go a little higher. Negotiated. And I think he went 3 times and the company said, I think we're going to rescind the offer because of the way in which you are presenting yourself. And is this an indication of how you will be as an employee? Either high maintenance or out for yourself or whatever that might be. But that company said they really, only did that because this person never seemed satisfied. But in all my years, I've never heard of a company rescinding other than, the negotiation didn't go well.
Right. And I've never heard an example of a position being rescinded, but it also leads you to understand that job seeking, job applications, job negotiating is not emotional. Mm-hmm. And that's why because in some ways we are so, I don't want to say desperate for a job, but desperate to get the process over, get a job, get established, get in and start working, that we get our emotions involved. And that could possibly take away from our ability to negotiate if we don't really go in with the proper information and attitude.
That's an excellent point. We usually say take the emotion out of it. This is, and remain objective. And, in some cases that reminds me of being confident, trying to be confident in this process. You don't want the employer to feel as if you are desperate.
Right. Oh, right.
Right. So having confidence and presenting your research. So, researching all of the salary information that you can get before you're presenting, that makes it seem less greedy, so to speak, helps take away that feeling and more factually based.
Right.
Well, according to my research, this is in Columbus, Ohio, and therefore I would like to ask for XYZ. It's definitely something you have to rehearse.
Yes, exactly.
So that you feel somewhat comfortable. Mm-hmm.
Well, that probably leads into when is the proper time to discuss the salary and negotiate a salary offer. We encourage our clients to be patient. Let's put it that way. You're not supposed to talk about it, but there is a time and some best practices. What would you suggest?
That's a wonderful question because you definitely could sabotage that negotiation power if you do it too early on. And I want to make the point that each interview, you have the opportunity to increase your value to the organization. In other words, as you move through the process, other candidates are being eliminated and you become more powerful. Your negotiation power increases. So we used to, Brett, say, never even discuss it until point of offer. But that's changed a little bit in that it's such a long process in some cases and involves so many people on a search committee that it is okay to test the water at the beginning. So let me give you an example of that. Most organizations will ask you on a phone screen about salary. And so you want to be prepared. Mm-hmm. So we encourage doing all the research you can very early on. As you're in job search, get all that research out of the way. Make sure you understand each industry, because in some cases you're talking about apples and oranges. If you, for example, I worked in nonprofit and then I moved into corporate outplacement, and that's definitely apples and oranges on what they can offer. But I'm utilizing the same skills and teaching the same classes, advising people on job search and so forth. But I needed to be aware of the differences in those industries so I can be a knowledgeable job seeker. So prepare early on, do the research, and set a range for yourself that's acceptable. So when you get that question on the phone, my first piece of advice, should they say, oh, what salary are you making or what salary do you expect? Put that back on the HR professional by saying, well, let me ask you what salary range has been set aside for this role. And then I will let you know if that's acceptable. And typically they will do that. I've had lots of HR friends say, unless someone asks me, I don't offer that information. So I'm advising to job seekers always ask. Always ask the HR professional and put the ball in their court.
Boy, what a secret idea.
Empowering that is. Two bits of information already in regards to stand your ground, basically. And you're you have more latitude than you realize in this whole process. That's interesting.
Right. That's a good way to say it.
You sure do.
Because how many times we're all afraid, again, I keep from the very beginning of this podcast, I've said nobody wants to talk about money. They're afraid to question. And oh my gosh, oftentimes clients will say, well, they asked me about what I wanted in salary and I didn't know what to say. And I think I made it too low. And it's okay to basically put it right back into their bailiwick. Good point, Marilyn. Thank you.
And at that point, they honestly just want to know if you're both in the ballpark. And I think that's a benefit to job seekers as well.
Sure.
Because, we all know that there are different job titles that sound similar, or maybe they sound much higher than they are, and so forth. So it's not a bad thing to just to determine if you're in the ballpark. So by them providing the range, or if they're not willing to provide the range, then be ready with your range. And then at that point, what's happening is, they'll either say to you or you to them, is the range that I've determined similar to yours? Are we in the ballpark? That's essentially, I've heard from HR professional colleagues say, we just want to determine if it's worthwhile to move forward, because that's a lot of time on both the job seeker's part and the organization's part to move forward. And if you're very far apart, reevaluate the role, and perhaps that you choose as a job seeker not to move forward.
Correct.
But that's, yes. And the other thing is, often you may be asked, what are you making now? Right. So I want to make a very big point to say that it's never appropriate to talk about what you're currently making until the very end, and only if that is in your favor. In other words, if you need to reveal later when you're made an offer that you're currently making more than that, that might be some leverage, but really at the beginning is not appropriate. If they ask you the question, what are you currently making? Then you need to deflect and say, well, I'd much prefer to refer to the market, the market value of this role. I'd much prefer to fit into the range that you are currently offering. So may I ask you what that range is? Again, this is an example of apples and oranges. You may be in a nonprofit. You're talking about a role in which there is more flexibility to offer, or just, completely, could be thousands of dollars. So always redirect to either the market value or what are you currently offering, and not mention your current salary.
Well, and this is really critical too for mature job seekers who are doing a career change.
Yes.
Or they may be retiring and they're looking for a job that's still a good position, professional position. So they expect a salary, but they know they're not going to be making the 6-figure salary they made in the past. Right. So to say, oh, I make $100,000 for a position that they know is only worth 50, then that's just shooting themselves in the foot, because the employer is going to assume they're going to demand $100,000. So good way. And as you said, deflect.
And Carol, I know you meet with a lot of people, and so do I, with this same issue. And might be another podcast, but that is when someone decides that they've had this role that has been all-encompassing, very high level, and now they want to take a step back from that. So that's part of negotiation. I'm not sure that's part of negotiation. That conversation might be happening much, much earlier in either the information interview or in the initial interview, in terms maybe the employer wants to sees on your resume that you've had this high-level position, and talk about your interest in this particular role. So hopefully you've had those conversations early on, but I'm sure it will surface again should you be offered a position and they want to just make sure that you'll be satisfied and stick with the role, and that you're happy to take a little bit of a step down. But that's another layer of negotiation.
Because as you said, to be a win-win, the employer wants to hire not just the right person, but somebody who's going to stay with them for a while. You, in turn, as a candidate, want to work for the right employer and want to stay. So the negotiations are just to make sure that the table is set correctly for both.
That's right.
So if we,
you mentioned something about the salary range a couple of times. What would you suggest that range? Again, bottom end, not specific dollar, but the range between. I know the low end is basically, I'm not going to take anything lower than this, but is there a range that's, whoa, you're talking $30,000 difference here. We can't do that. Is there a suggested range level?
Sure. That's where the market research, the market value, market research comes into play. And so if you're knowledgeable, when you do your research and you learn generally an average, based on your experience, number of years and so forth, that should be your goal. That should be sort of the middle of the range, because remember, in order for it to feel like win-win, you got to have a little wiggle room there. So to your point, you're spot on. The bottom of that range is what we call the walk away. So the walk away means, I can't accept anything lower, either because it doesn't help me make ends meet in terms of lifestyle, or
your value
doesn't make me feel valued.
Right.
So my walkaway point, the middle is what we hope to achieve, and a little bit of wiggle room, increase that a bit, so that you have a little playroom. When they offer, they'll feel like they're coming down. That you're, and that you meet in the middle, and so you achieve something that feels valuable to you. Generally, that's a $10,000 range. So now you mentioned $30,000. If you see that large of a gap, there may be some conversation around the level of this job.
Right.
What it is that I'm expecting versus what it's offering.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And two, sometimes when you look at postings and you see salary range, I won't swear that the state agencies are still doing this, but they used to post the range, but this is like from the moment you walk in till you retire 30 years later. Okay. That's not the range we're talking about. That's a salary level. I don't know what the correct term is. The range is the hiring range right now. With the posting as it is. Okay. So we want to make sure that another term I want to make sure we have down is market value. So give us the specifics that you would consider to be market value.
Sure. So market value is specifically what the formula includes the number of years of experience you have in that industry, what you're offering, and then it has to do with geography. So what is that industry offering in Columbus, Ohio, to someone of your years of experience? Now, that sounds pretty black and white, but it's not an exact science.
Right.
So that's why we suggest there are several salary sites that are online, and we're happy to share some of those.
I'm just going to ask.
Sure.
Because that was going to be my next question in my mind going, okay,
where do I
we have our
go to
listeners
do
all
this?
jabbed up
Yes,
to do this. Where do I
right.
go to find out?
One of the things to just step back a second on market value. I've seen this with clients who have come in with a fairly high salary in their previous job because they'd been there a long time. It could have been heavy manufacturing where they made a lot of money, possibly due to union membership or whatever. They're coming in at a high level expectation, but they are applying for jobs that do not cover that salary range. They're not even close. Somebody coming from working in an auto plant at $30 an hour because they've been there 30 years is not going to go to customer service at $15 an hour. They're going to expect the 30. So that's the other part of doing your research on market value is, because you want to be paid this does not mean the job is worth that much money to the organization.
Right. So I think that's part of assessing. Well,
Yes.
that's your market research. That's your research. Yeah.
Exactly.
So that you may decide not to apply.
Right.
Based
Exactly.
on that information.
Exactly. And so really when you're doing your salary research, if you've done your previous research about the positions, what your transferable skills are, where you could take those skills, what kinds of positions you're interested in, and do the salary research at that level, then by the time you get to a specific company, specific industry, specific geographic location, you're not going to be surprised.
Right. We do say 80% of negotiation happens before you even enter the negotiation process.
Oh, exactly.
With research and
really when you're applying, that research needs to be done.
right.
So.
And you begin if you do determine that it's a job you want to apply for, then as we mentioned earlier, every step of the way you're showing value,
right,
and increasing your power of negotiation. So that's all considered negotiation.
Okay. So I cut you off, Brett. What was that?
No, you're fine. No, in regards to the research, what are some resources?
So some good salary sites, and we do recommend you look at least 3. And because it's not an exact science, because there is a variety of job titles, there may be 3 jobs that are very similar, almost duplicate, and they have different titles. So you have to play around a little bit with these salary sites, plugging in titles. What is the constant is your years of experience and Columbus, Ohio, or Franklin County, wherever you live. So some salary sites that I find that are good are salary.com. One of my favorites is glassdoor.com. Glassdoor has more than salary information. It has information about the company, testimonies from employees. I even researched the other day with a client, a particular position she was applying for, and they had the exact salary for that position being paid, sort of even a small range of people and what they make. So that was really great information to have before the negotiation process. Knowing what the company is already paying folks in that role was very helpful so that she was realistic. And that's another piece of research. I know when I applied at Ohio State, because it's a state agency and those salaries are public, I did some research on what people with a director title in career services were already making at Ohio State. So that helped me remain realistic.
Right.
In terms of, not looking like I'm going to ask for above and beyond what most directors were making.
And do I understand correctly that with Glassdoor, they do some checking before they publish this information?
Yes.
So it's not garbage in, garbage out kind of thing.
Right.
So
Exactly. So that's one of my favorites. Let's see. I have a list here. If you are, let us say you are considering another city outside of Columbus, then there are some cost of living calculators. So you can plug in Columbus, Ohio or Boston and, because the coasts are generally much higher cost of living. But I've even discovered in the state of Ohio, we have a difference between Cincinnati and Columbus and Cleveland. And
sure.
So you should definitely check. We've had alumni of Ohio State not do that. And then they were disappointed moving to, let us say, Cincinnati. There's the difference between Cincinnati and even Columbus. So, again, with the whole thought of being an informed job seeker. So, there's payscale.com, bestplaces.net. Those are great cost of living calculators. So I would check about 3 of these. So salary.com, salarylist.com, payscale.com, and Glassdoor are some of my favorites.
And we will have those links on the podcast notes for our listeners. Okay, great.
Compare those and determine an average. They should be within that $10,000 range, but I would come up with an average. And again, as we said earlier, Brett, that would be your mid-range.
Okay. So Marilyn, we don't like to talk about money, but there are other kinds of things too, benefits that could be negotiated. So
yes.
Can you give us a few of the steps on that process?
Sure. And so we typically say, take care of the salary negotiation first. So try to have that conversation. Try to complete your negotiating. In many cases, we don't always get a win-win. And so think about all the things that are important to you in this stage of your life. And so it's important to do that every step of the way. And so for our mature job seekers, perhaps you are empty nesters now, or you are Encore Careers retired. And so think about your lifestyle and what it is that's important to you and make that list and prioritize that list. So for some, it's part-time. For some, it's flexibility. Others working from home, if the job allows and so forth. So you make your list of what we call values, job values, that things that are important to you. How far away from home? What's the commute?
Right.
So, all those things that might be more important.
How vacations are
right.
Negotiated, not just in the amount of vacation, but some companies only allow you to take a week of vacation at a time. You can't take a day here and a day there. So there might be flexibility in something like that.
That's right. I was working with someone the other day, and to your point, Brett, she got a great offer. It was $10,000 more than she was currently making at Ohio State. And because she was going to corporate. So there we have apples and oranges. So she said, I'm happy. I don't want to negotiate. And I said, well, let's do our research. So we did. But then it came out that she said that the vacation is a little bit lower than, and also there's some differences in retirement. Because we had a good retirement package.
Exactly.
So when she presented, in her negotiation, she presented those two facts, and they made her salary higher, and they gave her a little more vacation time. So she wasn't going to negotiate, and she did. And when she started really looking into the details of what was important to her and what was different between what she currently has, and they really wanted her. And I want to make that point too. When you get to when you're at point of offer, you're the one they want. You're the one they love. And so do feel some confidence in that. In particular, getting into these other aspects of an offer, feel some confidence that you have some negotiation power. Number one, this organization does not want to start over with interviewing.
Exactly.
It's a very long process, a
true.
huge investment. And that always brings confidence to me. If you're the one they've identified that they want to offer this position to, then know that that's why you have a little more negotiation power. So, so she gained her confidence and brought those two facts to them, and they said, we want you. you're the one we want. And so let us make your salary a little higher to compensate. And here are a few more vacation days. So as Carol said, make your, assess the entire offer. Honestly, they'll give you a package. And so once you settle, the salary piece, and if it's not quite where you would like it, then look at the other pieces in which you can make up for that. Or if you are satisfied, and I should say, if you are satisfied with the salary, then look at the rest of the offer as well, because there might be details that may or may not suit you.
Well, and we don't want the listeners to think that they shouldn't have already looked at those benefits, because oftentimes that benefits information is available to them, and they may be a question that they can ask early on in their interviewing, particularly if they've gone from one level to the next level to the next level, and they know they're still in the running. Then maybe you could ask the question, could you give me a little bit of information about the benefits package that this position will include, so that you could take a look at that, because that's a lot of things to look at in possibly a short period of time.
Yes, and that's a thing we should talk about too. When do I have to answer?
Right.
So, but organizations now have so many cool things that they may not talk about at the beginning, like a gym on site, so you don't have to pay for your own gym membership, or many of them are offering meals for their employees because companies are competing with one another to be good places to work.
Right. And it's not just a ping pong table.
Yeah.
Or even to the point of direct deposit. Some companies don't even have direct deposit, and they're still, cutting checks. Let's put it that way.
Right.
They're direct deposit, and you've never had that before in your life. You go, that's a great perk. Wow. And other people, though, may consider that normal. So you never know until you read the details.
Yes. Right? Yes. But we mentioned, how much time do I have to think about it? And so we absolutely recommend that you never take an offer on the spot.
Right.
We do have a lot of emotion when we're offered a role. We're elated. We're glad that we're relieved. We're all these things, especially if you're very, very happy about the offer. So you do need to step away from that phone call, and hopefully they will be emailing that offer to you in writing very soon.
And that's probably a good thing to make sure you always get, is an offer in writing.
Because as Carol said, there are many aspects of it, and you want to be able to evaluate that. So they usually want you to get back to them in 24 hours. Now, you'll be surprised by this, but you really could take up to a couple of weeks. They won't like it. And, if you can evaluate and decide in a couple of days, of course, that's better, because you may want to talk to family members, significant other. You want to maybe you have another offer. Maybe you have another, not offer per se, but a place you are pursuing and you haven't heard back. So this is a good time to get that ball rolling. So you may want to call another employer and say, at this point, I want to let you know that I do have an offer, but I remain highly interested in your organization. And that will move the process along. If they don't want to lose you as a candidate, they'll get things rolling. Sometimes they cannot, but if they can, they'll move things along.
Right.
So you may need a little more time in that instance. That can't happen overnight either.
But absolutely don't make that decision on the fly.
That's
Always ask for at least a couple of days. If they call you on a Wednesday or Thursday, ask till the next Monday.
Right.
This is not uncommon for the employers. And again, you want the employer to have an impression that you are a contemplative, deliberate, acting person, and this is just part of the process.
That's right. That's right.
Fabulous.
So you should take your time and read through everything and make sure, you've read all the details. I mean, you don't want to miss something like travel's required, or there might be a weekend here and there, or, something. And I've heard those stories.
Yes.
So,
yes. So, Marilyn, we had talked at the beginning that there were some industries that don't allow for negotiation. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit.
Sure. And if you two want to add to that, but sometimes government, they have their definite tiers and career paths in which they don't often allow for negotiation. My daughter's a teacher, so she absolutely said in education, it's set. It's a between the union and the school board. So not a lot of negotiation there. You had mentioned retail. That's often a set salary in which you're not able to negotiate.
Or a very small range.
Right.
Very small range. You're looking at literally dimes as opposed to thousands.
Right.
Yeah.
So those are the few that I have heard. But other than that,
Maybe sales with straight commission and such probably have some little leeway. The negotiation I've seen in the sales might be the list that you potentially walk into that exists at this company that you're in. It all depends on your level of sales expertise and your background. But I think sales may have that little bit of wiggle room, but not very much.
Mm-hmm. Well, and something I learned in by coaching clients going into sales is if they talk about potential earnings, to ask for a history of those being obtained. Is that right, Brett?
Correct.
Because they could say, you have the potential of earning XYZ, and by the way, nobody's ever accomplished that.
Right.
So that may look like great.
You should be able to ask for the list you're going to work and see what it has it build, I guess you could say, or the potential, the income that's come into the company. I think maybe with sales, from my experience with sales, the one thing you can negotiate much more freely, vacation. Some other perks that it's just a set commission rate and a set, you have to go out and hustle and get the business, but there are some things that they can play with. Okay, traditionally we have 2 weeks vacation. They need 3. We can work with the 3. As long as you can legitimize and show your value, you can do that, from my experience at least.
There are probably specialty positions. So if you're going into a position through a recruiter, there may be a set amount of money. Or if it's a temporary job or a seasonal job, chances are there's not going to be much of a range, if any at all. But again, if you've done your research, you're going to know that ahead of time. So, and hopefully, the employer has done a good job in putting all that information into a job description. But we know that those are few and far between, actually, and that job descriptions usually have lots of holes, lots of omissions, and a lot of hyperbole.
Yes,
it doesn't necessarily tell you really what you're going to do. So you just have to be careful going through all of that. So
another thought that I had is, and you mentioned it, Carol, if you're transitioning into a different career, which a lot of our clients are, how do I do the research and input number of years of experience? So I want to echo what Brett said, and that is honor your years of experience, because I think a lot of people transition, you think they have to start with entry-level positions or an entry-level salary range, and not so. There's so many things that we learn as professionals in terms of working. And we always say this, that boomers have a lot to teach our younger colleagues, right?
Exactly.
In the work world. So you just have to, in terms of interviewing, figure out how to translate to an employer based on that job description. But that can be kind of tough when you're trying to do your research and plug in number of years of experience in a new industry, so.
But if they take it from the perspective of those transferable skills and really looking at what your skills were in the old position, what skills are they looking for? It's not responsibilities, it's not tasks, but to really look at the skill levels and then your accomplishments in the old industry, you can more readily talk about. So it may not be years, but you could talk about accomplishments that may be even more valuable. That in the last 5 years, here are all my accomplishments. It doesn't matter that I've also done those the last 30 years, but in the last 5 years, here's what I've accomplished. And so it should say a lot and keep that candidacy very valuable for an employer.
And you had mentioned the market is such that employers are really looking for good people. So I think they're a little bit more open to those who are transitioning into new careers.
Right.
So,
Good.
Great.
A lot of information in this podcast. I have a feeling our listeners are going to go back and listen again because of all the little pieces. But what would be the 2 to 3 tips that you'd want our listener to take away from this?
I would say that to do your research, to make sure that you have a good understanding and you're armed with information about the market and your value, and to set yourself up for success as a confident job seeker for this particular process. So whether that means rehearsing with someone, but really be informed about what's happening in Franklin County, in your industry, with data, and then personally sort of rehearsing and do engage in the process. Unless you're in one of those industries that we mentioned, you really should always negotiate and make sure that it's, at the particular time that it's appropriate. to do
Right.
so. Not too early and, make sure that it's at the right time when you feel like your negotiation power is at its highest.
Exactly. And taking that emotional level out of it,
Yes.
then you're really looking at building a relationship, not one-upsmanship. It really, to make that win-win. So great. Marilyn, thank you so much. This was
you.
wonderful.
You're welcome.
It was
It's
great
my
to see you
pleasure.
again and
Thank
have you
you.
into the office, and we'll have to come up with another topic for you to come and visit us with.
I would love to do that.
Wonderful.
That'd
Thank
be
you
great.
again.